Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Uxtsuki. This is one of the last videos related to aesthetic pixel art because I also need to talk just a bit about animation, but this is almost like the last step into aesthetic images, right? In this video, I will talk a lot about the formal or traditional principles of art, and actually we are gonna read some articles in art. I will show you three things about art in three different sources. Two of them are websites in order to understand more about what is artistic. So here is the principle of art. There is these elements of art: this line, shape, form, value, space, color, and texture. I think I talked of each one of them in my pixel art tutorials, and now let's go for the principle of art. So we have the rhythm, balance, emphasis or contrast, proportion, gradation, harmony, variety, and movement. So this is the principle of design that indicates movement created by a careful placement of repeated elements in a work of art to cause visual tempo or beat. So for example, if you have something that repeats every space, for example, and in the end the space between these objects are close to each other, so actually we perceive that this is getting further or faster, all right, depending upon the perspective. Because if something is close to me and there is two other things away from me, even if they are in the same distance, they would look as like close to each other. As an exercise, place a finger in front of your face, for example. Look at this, and now use two fingers and place away from your face like they are almost aligned to each other, like they are in a diagonal. If you have something that is close to two others that is away from you, you have the feeling that it is getting further or faster. So we have the balance, a way of combining elements to add a feeling of equilibrium or stability to a work of art. Major types are symmetrical and asymmetrical. I talked about the slimes that are symmetrical, for example, and they could be asymmetrical by, for example, damage a part of it, for example. But in the art part, it's more about if I have too much weight or too much information in a certain part of the piece, the other one should balance this, but the same amount of weight, the same amount of elements, or actually being asymmetrical and have way less compared to the other one. We have the emphasis, a way to combine elements to stress the difference between those elements, and it can be read as contrast. So as I said, if you have, for example, a hair of a woman that is close to you, you might see every single hair strand. But if this woman is away from you, you are not seeing that difference. So the contrast between each hair is weaker, and maybe this woman in front of a very white or very yellow background actually creates another contrast. We have the proportion principle of design that refers to the relationship of certain elements to the whole and to each other. So for example, if I have something that is really small, such as this period, and I have a human as big as this T, maybe if I imply that this point as well is a human, so the T becomes a giant. We have a gradation, a way of combining elements by using a series of gradual changes on those elements. Large shapes to small shapes, dark hues to light hues. These are something like gradients. If I have a dirt path, for example, that is decorated with statues or even like stones, if I place a lot of stones and they are smaller to the previous one, so I have the feeling of gradation of getting smaller. So even maybe a degradation, like the things getting more and more used, let me put it this way. Or for example, if I have a shadow that is purple, the midtone that is red, the highlight that is yellow, and I make the each step toward the next one smoother by adding more changes, more steps, this will feel like a gradient. We have harmony, a way of combining similar elements in an artwork to extend their similarities, achieved through use of repetition and several gradual changes. We have variety, a principle of design concerned with diversity or contrast. Variety is achieved by use different shapes, size, and or colors in a work of art. Movement, a principle of design used to create the look and feeling of action to guide the viewer eyes throughout work of art. So you might feel that sometimes say the same thing Like harmony isn't the same thing almost as gradation or variety. Yeah, it's because one part actually may represent more than one thing. You, human, are more than one thing. You are maybe either a son or daughter, as well a father or a mother, as well a friend. Maybe you are not only good with math but also with art, so you are also more than one thing. So do not worry or stress that hard because some things looks like the same. The more you study about, more you're gonna perceive their differences. Now is about some composing techniques you might face. This is the site Draw Painting Academy, and I will just talk about because the other things we already saw about composition, rules, theories, and techniques. So we have the framing. It looks like you are framing some certain area. We have the leading lines, are suggestive lines that direct attention around the painting. It's like if your eyes would follow a movement, so they can be implied or actually lines. So for example, we have this boat in here behind these two person. We are actually looking at it like this and then going this because we are trying to look at the boat. We also, if we will look at this person, it's natural to look at his arm. We have the golden ratio, that is the ratio of 1 to 1/618. How big or how fast or how distant something become. We have the rule of thirds. This is very easy to use. It's basically if you divide your grid into 9 sections by tracing 2 parallel lines and dividing your grid into 3 horizontal stripes and also doing the same thing in the vertical. So now you have 3 lines and 3 columns. The things, the subjects that are in the intersection of these parallel lines becomes focal points. So for example, this cup right here becomes a focal point. This bottom becomes the ground. This tree follows these. Most bears is in the middle. So each part of the grid is actually a different painting. We have the simplification. You getting rid of any detail or any hard edges, anything that could steal attention, and just implying them. As I said in pixel art, where you can actually make something looks as something or feels as something. I'm making a cluster and adding a hint of it instead of make, for example, all bricks for the brick wall, for example. We have the rule of odds, so naturally odd things feels more interesting than even things. We have triangles, so you divide your grid into 2 triangles wherever you want, but and with this you kind of creates the symmetry. So for example, if I trace a line in here, I'll have 2 triangles, right? This triangle is way more filled than this triangle. And we also have the Gestalt principles. In this website from Interaction Design Foundation, we have the emergence. So it's basically how images emerge from separate things. So even though these are actually clusters separated from each other, an image of a dog emerged from this. We have the closure. Our brains like to fill gaps and seek pattern. That's why pixel art is actually really eye-pleasing. So the closure principle is actually our brain will fill the gaps of images in order to achieve a whole and a complete, a closed image. The third one is the common region. We tend to interpret things as a group if they have a small similarity. So for example, we feel that this is a group apart from this just because of a background square. The continuity or continuation principle, it says that our brain will follow some lines or some curves. So even if this is not connected, we will see these as an arrow. For example, we have the proximity, that is, we read as things that are close together as a group. So for example, we have these 3 squares and these other 3s. We will read as this is kind of related to each other as this is not related at all. We have this smooth stability. That is, we are gonna try to read images in a 3D form. So even if it just hint there is something behind of something, we will read this as a 3D or 3-dimensional object. We have this figure on the ground principle. That is, if we focus in different grounds, we are able to read images differently. So for example, if we have this Rubin's face, if we focus in the black parts as the background, two faces emerges from this. But if we face that these white parts is actually the background, this in the middle we have a vase, an image of a vase. We have this invariance. So if I have shapes, for example, connected, even if these shapes are transformed, are distorted, are rotated, etc. If this structure is kept, it will be read as the same thing. So for example, we have this sphere connected to a cylinder, that we have another object right here. So it doesn't matter if we rotate, distort, change how each thing is related to each other. If we keep the structure, actually it will be read as the same thing in a different perspective. The pregnance is our brain will simplify some shapes in order to avoid complexity. So for example, if you look at this, your brain will start ignore this part. It's not like your will forget these exist. It's not like this, but this complexity of the shapes will be simplified automatically by your brain and be read something like this. You won't look at this like as a lot of rings that intersect each other. Rather, you're gonna read as a lot of semi rings close to each other, and there is just something in the middle that is how they are related to each other. You won't think as these are crossing rings, for example. We have the similarity, how objects or subjects that share a certain characteristics will be perceived as a group. We have these squares. Just because these are in a different color, you will feel that they are grouped, they are related in some way, but it's actually just squares in different colors. So we have the symmetry and order. We will trend into read things are related to each other if they are symmetric. So even though this is a different thing from this, we feel like this matches and this don't, even though they could just be placed like this. And we have the common fate. So if you start to look at this image, it's natural to be perceived that every single arrow facing right is moving to the right, while this two that is facing the left is moving to the upside side. And actually, they are just arrows. Okay guys, that is it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.